Brooke Eagle, and we are back with another episode of the Forsyth Mags podcast. And today I have a special guest and a dear friend, Emily Davis with Feet Winston-Salem. Hey, Emily.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Good to see you.
You too.
So, Feet, 2 locations.
2, yeah.
How many years?
Man, Winston is 17 and a half, so we'll be 18 in
Almost
August.
an adult.
Yeah, legal voting age. Winston gets to vote. And then Clemens, we just had our 1-year anniversary in December.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. And some
like y'all
people
just
don't
opened.
know that we sold the New Balance store back to New Balance, but that's been a year and a half now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no more New Balance.
No more New Balance.
But Clemens was a great choice.
Yeah, it was a great first year.
Yeah.
Some of it was like, resetting our expectations because Winston has just grown and grown, and I kept saying, Keith, do you remember like how we tracked to make sure we didn't have a negative day in the early days where, you're just hoping that somebody will show up and that, but it was, even back in the early days, it was so overwhelming because we didn't know how to do retail. We didn't know what we were doing.
So how many locations has the Winston location been in?
Oh, gosh. We started on Ronaldo Road across from the former children's home, now Crossnor. Then 4.5 years later, we moved to Miller Street, next where Publix wasn't there yet, but we moved there. And now I think there's a Novon office in there.
Yeah, there is.
But we were there about 5 years, and we just celebrated 8 years in the location we're in. So
wow. So this location is by far y'all have been in the longest.
The longest, yeah. Huh. And some people still say it's our new location.
I know.
Yeah.
I still say that.
Yeah.
Because I remember me and my mom when we were doing like triathlon training back in the old days. You were at your very first location still. Like I remember.
Oh, on Ronaldo, yeah, yeah. And we were. I mean, you'd have 4 people getting fit for shoes, and we felt like we were completely busting at the seams because it was only 2,500 square feet.
Tiny.
It was so small. And then we moved, so we went from 2,500 to like, I don't know, I think it was almost
2,500 fleet feet.
Yes, not, that's so good. Not square feet, fleet feet. There you go.
Right.
And then we're in 7,200 now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's
the
big.
store now is huge.
It's big. And Clemens is, I don't know, Keith knows all these numbers, but Clemens is, I think, 3,200 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you and Keith, your husband,
Yes.
for people who may not know,
Yeah.
y'all have been working together now for 17 and a half years.
Yes, 17. And we've been married. April, we celebrate 21 years of marriage.
Oh, so you guys were not newlyweds, but like kind of.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
We, man.
How's that going?
What's it like working with your spouse?
Well, I'm kind of an open book. In the early days, it was so hard. We had a baby when the store was a year old.
Oof.
So that was hard. We really didn't know what the heck we were doing. He had left corporate finance, like commercial lending,
I can't
venture
even
capital.
imagine him doing that.
Imagine Keith putting a suit on every day.
No, I really cannot fathom.
Well, that's why he isn't doing it anymore. But he was good at it, but he just hated the office. And so we had a baby when the store was a year old. I was working for Flea Feet Corporate. The corporate office is based in Carborough, and I was there full time. And about a year and a half
you
into...
were at Sarah or Haynes before.
Yeah,
that.
I was at Haynes. Yeah, Sarah Lee branded apparel, and then right as I was leaving, it was Haynes brands.
Okay.
But we were both corporate. We went to MBA school at Wake, and then I came out charging ahead, trying to do this corporate marketing thing, and he was doing banking. And after 2 years of that, we were like, this is not really what we want to be doing. We want to do our own thing. And he was he's definitely entrepreneurial. And I'm more risk averse, but, we were married, and I'm like, well, I definitely don't want to.
You're risk averse? That doesn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
I think
fit to me.
I'm risk averse when it comes to putting everything you have on the line, financially. We were
scary.
broke,
Scary.
broke, and I had so much student debt. From undergrad, graduate, we were buying a house. We had a mortgage. We still have a mortgage, but we had a mortgage, kids, and and then he's like, "Let's take everything we have, which isn't very much, and open a retail store." And I was like, "No." So anyway, the early days were so rough. We had Addison, who's now 16. 2 years later, we have Hope, and so I'm mom, trying to manage 2 little kids. They went to First Baptist daycare, which is no longer there, but I would literally like run out the door at 5:56. They'd be the last kids picked up. Oh. And it was very hard. I mean, we were barely getting by, trying to chip away at student loans. And I remember a Flea Feed owner from Santa Rosa told us, get ready for peanut butter and jelly. And that's what it was. That's what it was like. You know, I mean, tracking every bill in this like journal I bought at Borders that was in Thruway.
Borders. I forgot about Borders.
Yeah, Borders. And I would like have to track every bill because we were down to the dollar. So after a couple years, Keith was like, hey, I need you to come work in the business full time. And he proved to me on a spreadsheet, because he's a spreadsheet guy. He proved to me on a spreadsheet that it would work and that we wouldn't be living in a cardboard box. And so I'm like, all right. So I ended up leaving Flea Feed Corporate and joined him full time. And in the beginning, it was like, oh, how cute, we worked together. That didn't last long. And then I'd say about after that first 6 months, I remember it well, where I really was like trying to figure out, what do I do? You know, I don't know what I'm doing and didn't know what my role was. And so the next, I mean, I want to say it was about 7 years. It was horrible. It was really horrible. It was my most anxious years of my life. Visited a counselor for anxiety. I just wake up. I always felt like I was kind of suffocating, and I was
like the constant like fight or flight.
Oh yeah, like I had a 30-pound weight on my neck.
Yeah.
Always felt nauseous. It was terrible. It was really bad, and talking about work made it worse. And then, you know, of course, you're with the guy all day. I'm with Keith all day at work, and we're talking about work, and then we go home, and that's all we talked about. And then, you know, you're still trying to manage 2 little kids, and it was terrible. It goes down by far as like the worst years of my life. And then, let's see,
I was gonna say, what made it after the 7th year? What kind of was the shift that happened?
We went to counseling, because it was like, how the heck are we going to work together? Either I needed to get out, or we needed to do something different, and because we were not going to sacrifice our marriage in order to save a retail store.
Yeah.
And so I went to a counselor, which was super helpful, Christian counselor, and a few lessons. Like, you know, one big lesson was, I'm not responsible for Keith's relationships with other people. That was a very valid, like, how other people view Keith is not, that's independent of me, you know, because like he would handle things with staff very differently than how I would handle them. And it would stress me out so bad, and it would irritate me. And it was a big lesson, like, butt out, Emily. What people think of how Keith handled it is up to them and Keith, and you have nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
so
and
that
you can't control that.
You
can't control how he's.
No, I can't. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I learned I could not control that. And then that was really big. And then the other really big one that I got actually from other Flea Feed owners that are, many are married and spouses working together, was that somebody had to have final say. So somebody had to be CEO final say. And even though
that's tough.
It is, yeah. Because we used to joke about like, okay, you take your store and I'll take my store and we'll see who does better. I mean, is that healthy? Obviously not. No. But we, somebody, somewhere along the line, it was like, okay, Emily, step back. Like, just because I feel as prepared to run it, and just because I would run it differently than he does, doesn't mean that his way is not a good way. And so I had to basically, you know, submit to your husband kind of like biblically. And I was like, for real? But because it's hard.
Yeah.
But you know what? I realized like my job as mom is really more important than my job as co-owner. And so that was probably the biggest shift, was like Keith was going to have final say. And we still struggle with that. And so, you know, it's been 17 and a half years. And we came to a conclusion actually this past October. Keith said to me a few months ago, I don't want my remaining working years to be us working together. And I was like, and I didn't take that in a, like, that's not the first time I've heard that out of his mouth. So I didn't take it negatively, because frankly, I don't really want all my remaining working years to be working with him either.
Yeah.
Because your spouse at work is really different than your spouse at home. And
Or they should be.
They should be. And it's so blurry. Like, there's just no way to completely separate it. So my plan was to step out of Flea Feet this past December. And I actually started looking at other positions.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Yeah, I updated my resume, and because I used to be in more corporate brand strategy stuff, and because I managed the national marketing for Fleet Feet corporate nationally on and off for 10 years. And so I was just looking all around, and, the desires of my heart have changed over time too. I really would love to do more nonprofit or ministry work. And Keith said to me, nobody's going to pay you to do the good works of the world. I was like, darn it.
Dang it, Keith.
I just want to help the homeless and go to Kenya, but why can't I get paid to do that? So I started looking around, and, I prayed a lot, of course, and just came to this conclusion that like none of that makes as much sense as just restructuring how we do things right now, so that we're not in each other's hair as much. And I just need to continue to remind myself that he is the final say, whether I like it or not. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, he's super smart. He's smarter than I am. And he just does things very differently than I do.
I think you're very smart. Don't sell
Brooke.
yourself
Thank
short.
you. He's smart in a different way,
Sure.
But he does things, we just don't do things the same.
Yeah.
And there's
But
nothing wrong with that.
That's also why I think you guys have a beautiful business, because you don't do things the same.
Yeah. And where we give each other grace for that, it works the best. Where it's like, Emily, you're good at this, so you go do that. And it's where I need to say, Keith, you're good at this, so you go do. And, he's the numbers, finance, analytics person. And I'm just not that I don't know how, it's just not how I do it. And it's not how I want to do it. And that makes him insane that I don't have spreadsheets and pivot tables to prove my answers, and looking at his spreadsheets with pivot tables makes me nuts, because I'm like, who cares? Just make a good decision, but we just don't, I do think that, our Winston store is one of the top 20 in the country, and there's like 280. Wow. And
congratulations.
Thank you. But it's come with a lot of hard work.
Sure.
And a lot of tears, but it's come that we've gotten there because of Keith's spreadsheets, I think. I mean, he's really diligent about his decisions, and he does it based on data. And he's like, you can't just wing it all the time.
But
I'm
why?
like, well, why not? So we're so I'm staying at Fleet Feet. At least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that.
Yeah. It's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
And obviously completely different, but I also am in business with my significant other.
Yeah.
And we have a third business partner, thank goodness, because he's sort of like our counselor.
I've thought about you and Gavin, actually, because I mean, it's hard, where you guys have two different personalities, just like me and Keith have different personalities. And it's like sometimes I'll hear something Keith said and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm mortified. Yeah. And then I'm sure he does the same with me.
When you said that you can't control how other people, how did you word it? React.
You're not responsible for it.
Yeah. Like same thing with me and Gavin. Like we're very different. And some of the things that he says or the way that he handles things, I'm like, no,
did he just say that?
But people, that's not my.
But it's not you.
It's not my deal. And people love Gavin and they love me and they love us for different reasons. Right. And same with you and Keith.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people to say Keith is so intense. He is, but he really does have like a bigger heart than me. I think he's softer than I am.
Yeah. I see that.
Because I'm like, he's like, why are you going all Jersey on them? I'm like, well, first of all, I'm from New Jersey, so there's.
So I literally can't help it.
I can't help it. But
DNA, fella.
But he is a softie, and he like tears up at commercials.
He's a girl dad.
He really is a girl dad, and I'm kind of like, oh, people suck it up. But yeah, I hope that however many more years we do Fleet Feet, that we can it does take constant grace. I mean, no different than being married 21 years,
Oh, for
anybody
sure.
If you've been married more than 5 years, like you just are signing up for like letting it roll off your shoulders on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it's hard.
Yeah.
But it is harder, I think, to be in business with your partner because you're, like you said, the line is very blurry for you. Sometimes you have to talk about work outside of work.
Yeah.
But you can't let it completely take over.
Well,
your
and it's a
life.
small business. And so like our staff, like people will say to me, your husband said whatever. And I'm like, okay.
But I didn't say that.
I didn't say that. And right now we're at work. So right now he's Keith. He's not your husband, you know? Cause there's so sometimes even with staff, there's that play of like, well, your husband. And I'm like, well, too bad. Because it's like, we don't have to continue to make it so blurry, that's been, I feel like sometimes we're like the parents at work and it's like, oh, the parents are bickering.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Me and Gavin will definitely bicker at
It's
the gym.
but the people that know us really well just know that we just move on and.
Yeah. So this just clicked for me, but none of the girls knew anything other than Fleet Feet.
No. And I think we've ruined them. They just, they have been living Fleet Feet their entire lives, especially Addison, she's 16. So the two oldest, we were, when we were new, every Saturday morning we were up at the crack of dawn. I was dragging those toddlers out of bed to go to 5Ks to just hope that, I could get them there without screaming. And that's it. None of them want any part of it, honestly.
I was going to say, do they have interest?
No, other than when they are broke and they want to earn some money, they're like, can I come work? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you don't ever want to learn anything that we do. No, I do think that they appreciate that Fleet Feet has provided for our family. And they do acknowledge that. The youngest, though, Samantha, is really the only runner in the house.
That's funny.
I remember, okay, this is totally random, but I remember I took Addison to a crazy running practice when she was like 5. And she had on a shirt that I had bought from a vendor that said future marathon runner. And we're at our first practice and she just cried and cried and cried. And another mom looked me in the eye and said, about her shirt, she said, little presumptuous, don't you think? I was like, what is wrong with you, woman? Like, who says that? You can tell my kid is hysterical and not enjoying this, and you seriously just said that to me? I'll never forget that lady.
I hope she listens to
I
this.
hope you were hearing this. You really hurt my feelings.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Because you don't have control over what your kids are gonna.
Well, it's like mom to mom.
Doing.
Don't make negative comments to another mom when it's obvious she's struggling with her kids. Support the mom. Jeez.
No mom shaming.
No mom shaming. No kidding. Anyway,
my
so my kids aren't really into running, but the little one, Samantha, kind of likes it. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I know. So my parents, I grew up with them both being entrepreneurs. My dad owned a body shop, and he didn't want either one of us to have anything to do with it. He didn't want us to be around the chemicals and the paint. He just was like, nope, I don't want this for you guys. And with the magazine with my mom, I have a degree in education because I was like, I don't know about working with my mom. Like, sounds maybe hard.
Yeah.
But then I kind of decided that was the path I wanted to take. So it's interesting how you kind of change. Like, as a 16-year-old, I definitely didn't think I would take over the magazine. But as a, mid 20-something, I'm like, okay, her job is pretty cool.
And what a blessing it's been.
Yeah.
Like a great relationship
and
builder.
we're still working together.
Yeah. And you still adore your mom.
Yeah. I get to work with my boyfriend and my mom. It's great.
Well, you're just clicking them off the list, aren't you? We've talked to Addison about ministry things because she's really interested in sustainable agriculture and doing some sort of her own farming somehow,
Ooh, very cool.
And we've talked to her about things like, okay, let's buy some land in Kenya and grow some coffee beans and employ some Kenyans and give them some work and then import them. And so I don't know.
She's been to Kenya with you
a bunch of times, and we're going back in March. I'm taking the two oldest back.
So tell us about your Kenya mission trips.
Yeah. So it started out back in 2014. Keith went with Addison, who was 6 at the time, to a children's home.
So she went when she was 6?
She went when she was 6, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
incredible.
She came home changed from that trip. I mean, I just remember her telling me, Mom, they worship like you've never seen. And she was 6. But yeah, so we started out going to a children's home. We got heavily invested, just time, money, energy, just pouring a lot of resources into it. And then things just developed over time that we knew it was time to move on. And so back in 2020, I guess, I got connected with Wesley Career, who's a Kenyan Boston Marathon champion. And he ran for Nike for 7 years, and he basically took all his winnings and poured it back into Kenya.
Wow.
And so we started a running academy, and a friend here in town connected us. And I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, this is what we do. And he knew Fleet Feet because he went to University of Louisville. And so we got connected with him, and we ended up partnering with him to raise a bunch of money to build a school for his program. Oh. So the school just opened last January, and we were there for the opening. And since then, he was able to raise funds for a new dining hall and a kitchen. And so he has 100 kids. Basically, he takes low income. I mean, a lot of Kenyans are it's like super poor, like poverty like you've never seen. Yeah. He takes kids that otherwise would not be able to attend high school, because high school in Kenya is not free. Good schools are boarding schools, and they run about $800 a year. And the average Kenyan family's income is $100 a month.
Wow.
So totally
that's
just
unrealistic.
No, totally unrealistic. So he provides 4 years of high school education, and then trains them with an elite running coach. And then ultimately, the goal is to get the best of the best and bring him to the U.S. to be sponsored by a brand here. So he has a kid, Wesley Kiptoo, who just got second in the Houston Half Marathon the other day.
Wow.
He's sponsored by Hoka. His brother is sponsored by ASICS. We have a girl named Sharon who we brought over for her senior year at Forsyth Country Day School. Yep. So she just got a 4-year scholarship to North Carolina Central.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We're working with Forsyth Country Day for a new student for this fall. So we have a boy that we're submitting an application for that as long as we can get the visa all worked out, he'll be attending. So the whole point is the bigger point is to provide a 4-year education to these kids in Kenya that otherwise wouldn't have access to the education, to provide the best runners with elite coaching in the hopes that they can go on and either run competitively in Kenya or somewhere in Europe as a means, using their God-given running talent as a means to create an income for their family.
Yeah.
Because there's a shortage of jobs. It's very hard to find where we have, you can go get a job at Subway or the gas station or Harris Teeter or wherever. There's just a lot of entry-level jobs in our world. There is not. Their economy does not have a lot of entry-level jobs. And so unless you have a 4-year degree in high school, you're basically on your own for plant a farm and live off your land. That's basically the future. So and then, the kids that come here, providing them access to a 4-year college degree, and then ultimately bringing their resources back to invest in Kenya.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that you've connected Kenya with Fleet Feet in your business here. I think that's like such a perfect merger.
Well, it's been, Wesley and I have very similar personalities where it's like think in depth about it after you do it. So his wife is Canadian.
That's how my mom is.
Yeah. His wife's Canadian, and his wife and Keith are very similar, where they're kind of the brakes on me and Wesley. But a lot has happened in just 2 years of really working hard together, and it's been amazing that it's about, because I've loved Kenya since the first day I went.
Oh, yeah.
And that we can connect Kenya and running.
It's on my bucket list to go with you to Kenya someday.
As long as I get my way, I go every year. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up, I want to talk really briefly about Mission Feet First. Another nonprofit that you guys have been doing for how many years now?
Yeah, we started in 2010.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So not too long after you started Fleet Feet.
Yeah, Keith had this idea, hey, we've got these returned shoes. At the time, we were getting customer returns, and most vendors wanted them back. And since then, vendors have really changed what they want. And so, they're like, you can keep them, but put them to good use. And so a lot of Fleet Feet stores have kind of a repurpose plan. We put ours, many are in excellent condition, but they're just not perfect enough to be resold for $150. And so we provide shoe fittings for the homeless community, tent city, sheltered adults, and then for low-income schools in the area. So, for example, we've got a big fitting coming up with Centenary Methodist, where they host the homeless and sheltered community for lunch, and we fit them all for shoes. And then we've got Cook Elementary coming up in a couple weeks. We always help the YMCA with their Bright Beginnings back to school program. So last year we were able to provide 600 pair of shoes for kids. Yeah. So it started out like a pair here and a pair there, and now it's been thousands of pair a year.
That's amazing. I have volunteered once for that. If people are interested in volunteering for that, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, we actually have I think we still have a volunteer form on our website, but you can always just reach out to staff at Fleet Feet WS. I always need volunteers.
Okay.
Because we put on a 5K at the prison a couple months ago. And
so cool.
That was amazing.
What an idea.
That
I
was
love
amazing. It was the best. They're actually letting me teach a Run for God Bible study Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I always need volunteers for all these things that we've got going on. And it kind of gets people outside their comfort zone. I think you came to the one at Rolling Hills.
It did.
Yeah. It gets you a little bit outside your comfort zone. And sometimes, people are like, why are you going to that neighborhood? I'm like, Jesus is always going with us. So I'm not worried about it. But, we do put ourselves out in the community. The whole point is to serve people in need. And we have the shoes. We have very generous donors that help us buy the inventory that we need when we have gaps. And that's part of what, that's what we're asked to do, right? Serve others. So anyway, always need volunteers.
I love that. Yeah. I think that, of course, Fleet Feet is your business, but you've also helped so many people through Fleet Feet, and I just think that's amazing.
Well, at some point, God taught me, hey, this isn't supposed to just be a shoe business. This should be a ministry. Yeah. And that's where Keith is like, and we still need to make an income, Emily, as a business. It's not all a ministry. And I'm like, oh, darn. Because he's like, you just give away the farm, wouldn't you? And I'm like, yeah that's why we need the spreadsheets. Yeah. But that's my favorite thing to do, is to just serve other people.
I already knew that about you, but it's just cool to watch you light up when you talk about it.
I love it.
When you talk about
I've told him, I'd love to work at the homeless shelter. He's like, yeah, well, let's get our kids through college. And
then we can discuss.
Then we can talk about that.
The realist.
That's
Keith,
right.
The realist.
He really is. I love him.
I love it. Well, Emily, always a pleasure to chat with you.
Brooke.
We will put your Fleet Feet contact information in the show notes if any volunteers want to touch base. And as always, you can find all of our Forsyth Mags content on our website, forsythmags.com, and you can find us on social media at Forsyth Mags. And that's a wrap for today. The views and opinions stated on this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting companies. This podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without expressed written consent of Forsyth Magazines Incorporated. Ooh, that's a mouthful.